Have you ever had that feeling like you're being played by words? Today, we're going to dive into author Peter Duke's fascinating work on what he calls neurolinguistic defense. Think of it as a user's guide for protecting yourself against word magic. And this quote really sets the stage perfectly. The goal here isn't just for me to point out the tricks of the trade. It's about empowering you to see the patterns for yourself in real time. So, let me ask you this directly. Are the words you hear every single day, from the news, from politicians, from advertising, are they actively programming your beliefs? The answer? Well, it might be a little unsettling. And that brings us right to our first section. It's time to reframe how we see language. It's not just for talking. It can be a tool for something far more strategic. Here's the core idea. Really sophisticated linguistic techniques, things like neurolinguistic programming, or NLP, are being used by big corporations and political groups. And we're not just talking about marketing here. This is what Duke calls language warfare, and it's designed to shape public opinion on a massive scale. So how does this magic actually work? Well, the blueprint behind it all actually starts with a concept from a very famous linguist, Noam Chomsky. Chomsky came up with this idea of a deep structure. Think of it like this. Before you even say a simple sentence like, "the cat sat on the mat," your mind holds this incredibly rich, complex idea. It knows the cat's color, its mood, the texture of the mat. That whole universe is the deep structure. But when you go to speak, you have to simplify. And it's right there, in that simplification, that the magic and the manipulation can happen. And that's where something called the meta model comes in. See, to communicate, we have to shrink that giant deep structure. We do it in three main ways. We leave information out, that's deletion. We kind of twist reality a bit, that's distortion. And we take one specific thing and stretch it out, that's generalization. Now, we all do this constantly. It's just how we talk. But these very patterns can be spotted, they can be analyzed, and yes, they can be exploited. All right, so enough with the theory. Let's get practical. How do you actually spot these manipulative plays out in the wild? Peter Duke points to what he calls the mother of all patterns, combining cause-effect with something called complex equivalence. Cause-effect is simple, right? It links an action to an outcome. But complex equivalence? That's where it claims one thing means something else. You put those two together, and you have a seriously powerful, persuasive tool. This example shows the pattern perfectly. The first part is a simple cause-effect claim. But that second part, the complex equivalence, that's where the real power is. It attaches this huge moral meaning to your action or your inaction. Suddenly, a simple choice is tied to this massive personal responsibility. Okay, here's another play you've heard a million times, the thought-terminating cliché. These are those short, catchy phrases that sound like wisdom, but they're actually designed to do one thing and one thing only, act like a mental stop sign and stop you from thinking any deeper. You've got phrases like, "it is what it is," which just shut down any analysis. But then you get the more weaponized versions, the labels conspiracy theorist, racist, climate denier. These are used to dismiss a person and their entire argument without ever having to engage with the substance. Heck, even something like Occam's razor can be used this way, to just declare the simplest explanation the winner and end the whole debate right there. So all of these tactics, they exploit a really fundamental weakness in how we process information. And this brings us to the absolute core of building a defense. You have to understand the difference between knowing and thinking. Thinking is an active process. It's about asking questions, it's about discovery. Knowing, on the other hand, can be pretty passive. It's just storing pre-thought ideas and conclusions. You can know a lot of things without ever really thinking about them. And it's that passivity that makes us vulnerable. This comparison makes it crystal clear. You've got the Stoic, like Marcus Aurelius, who sees an obstacle and says, the obstacle is the way. They accept it, they endure it. That's a form of knowing. But then you've got the strategist, like B.H. Littlehart. The strategist sees an obstacle and immediately starts asking questions to find a way around it. For the strategist, thinking is a continuous process of creating options. So how do we build this into an actual, actionable defense? How do you become the strategist of your own mind? Well, here are three core defensive techniques. First, define every single term. Don't let people get away with using vague language. Second, learn how to truly listen, not just to hear, but to spot the patterns we've been talking about. And third, and this one is so important, readopt a childlike curiosity. Be willing to ask questions and, just as crucial, be willing to admit when you don't know something. A huge trap people fall into is the false dichotomy, that either-or choice designed to divide and control.
Freedom versus control, left versus right. The only real way to win this rigged game is to not play. You have to escape the trap by changing your perspective.
One technique for this is called chunking up. So instead of arguing about freedom versus control, you move up to the bigger, broader category that holds them both: governance. Now all of a sudden, you're not caught in their trap anymore. You're analyzing the trap itself from above. And the other technique is chunking down. When someone uses a big, vague generalization like freedom, you can chunk down to something specific. What kind of freedom are we actually talking about? Freedom of speech, freedom of movement? This forces people to be specific, and it breaks the power of that big generalization. Which brings us back to the central theme, and this quote just sums it up perfectly. The path to intellectual freedom, it isn't about knowing more things. It's about reactivating our natural ability to think, to question, and to analyze. And that really is the ultimate takeaway. Your defense begins and it ends with questions. We are all born with the ability to think, and that ability is unlocked by asking the right ones. So the only thing left to consider is, what questions are you going to ask?